Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to create 3 automation projects using Python. These projects are going to be very fun and they will allow you to be able to see the power of Python by the end of this video. And the great thing about this project is that they are fun and they are practical. So you're going to see exactly how to use Python to create something that is actually useful, something that you can use and you can feel good about it and maybe show off to a potential employer. So this is the best way to learn Python or any programming language for that matter. All right, so I do have my code editor here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. I'm just going to call this main.py, as you can see, to start a Python project. So we're going to go ahead and import a few things here. Primarily, we're going to import this random library as well as the string library, because we are going to obviously use string to create these awesome passwords. Okay, so we have the random and string imported, and next we're going to define here a function. I'm going to call this generate password as such, and I'm going to pass length because I want to make sure that we are able to pass the length of the password. All right, so I'm going to put an if statement here. So I'm going to check the length that we're passing here. If it's less than 4, obviously that's not going to be a good length for a password, so we're going to do something. So I'm going to go ahead and just say raised. I'm going to raise a value error and pass in a message here. So I'm going to just say here password length should be at least 4 chars. Outside of my if statement here, I'm going to create a characters. So I'm going to say characters. And I'm going to use the string library because I need to generate those strings. Because of the characters have to be a mix of different kinds of characters. So I'm going to concatenate different kinds of strings per se. So I'm going to first of all use the string library and go and get the ASCII letters. And I'm going to say plus to concatenate all of them. I'm going to string and I'm going to get the digits because I also want digits, numbers per se. And then I'm going to also say string and I'm going to say punctuation. So we are going to create very strong password like this. That's why we're putting everything in these characters which we're going to be using. And the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an array, an empty array, which we're going to be adding things into it to generate our password. It's going to be equal to an empty array or list. And then I'm going to use that password that we just created here. And I'm going to start appending all of these characters that we created here, right? But in order to append things there, I'm going to make it all random so that we have that strong password. I'm going to use password, and as a list, I'm going to use the append, and this is where I'm going to start appending using the random, get the choice random element from a non-empty resource or sequence in this case. So I'm going to pass something. I'm going to say string again, and the ASCII, I want lowercase. Okay, that I'm going to go ahead and go to string ASCII lowercase to generate all of the ASCII lowercase characters here. And I'm going to go do the same thing a few times. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste a few times. And then I'm going to change each time what I'm looking for. So I'm going to do ASCII uppercase for this one. And the second one, I'm just going to do string digits. And the last one here, I'm going to use punctuation. So that's all we're doing here. We're appending to our empty password here. So each time we're going to have a random ASCII lowercase, and the next time uppercase, and so forth. Now the next thing, we're going to fill the rest of the password length, right? So now we have the characters, we have password which will have a lot of different characters or items inside of it that are random, which we appended here. And now we're just going to go ahead and say characters, or rather password. I'm going to start filling in all the things, right? Also randomize everything, so choice. And then I'm going to pass our characters, which is all of these that were created. And then I'm going to give I'm going to say length. It's going to be -4 as such. So here what we're doing here, we're just filling the rest of the password length with random characters. It's time for us to shuffle. Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and say random. I'm going to use the shuffle function, and I'm going to pass the password. Because at this point, as you see, our password should have all these random shuffled characters. Okay, so at this point, we know for sure that this password should be pretty strong. Now, keep in mind that this length here that we see, it's going to be the length that we're passing in our generate password function. Last thing we want to do, we want to be able to return the actual password. So I'm going to return, invoke the join function, and pass the password. So essentially, it's going to go ahead and return our nice password. That should have a length that we specify and very random characters. All right, so this is the end of this function. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to define a main, and now we are going to ask the user to enter the length of the password desired. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that inside of a try. Like this, I'm going to just say value to return something if something goes wrong. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and say print. I have string here, pass an error, and just pass E. All right, so what's going to be inside here? This is where we are going to prompt the user. Okay, so I can just put that into a variable called length. So I'm going to say length and say, I can use the input here to get something from the console. And then here I'm going to write something like enter the desired length of the password. Very good. So now that we have that length, but also remember we want to make sure that this length is also a type, which is going to be an int. So I'm going to wrap this whole thing into an int. Okay, so there we go. Now we have our length, which is going to be something like 4 or 5, whatever they have input. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and say password, just a variable, and I'm going to call the generate password. I'm going to pass the length, right? And I can just say length like this. And now we have our password, which should at this point should be generated, and we're ready to go. So what I'm going to do next, I'm just going to go ahead and print, and I can even say generated password and pass the password. Okay, that's pretty much it. So now that means when we run this, we should hopefully see something. Okay, so we have the generate password, we have everything that we need, and then we're calling. But before we go any further, I'm going to go ahead and do something. So put an if name such is equal to main, and that's when we're going to call main. Okay, by the way, we're going to have all the code in the description below so you can go and download and follow along. There we go. Let's see if this works. Python 3. If you're on Windows, I believe you just say Py or Python and then the name of the file, which in this case is main. And don't forget the Py. Okay. Voila, you can see says enter the desired. I made a mistake here. This should be desire with one R, but it's okay. And I'm going to just say 12, for instance. If you say 12, you can see got me something that is not right. Random choice, got an expected keyword K. Let's see what the problem we have here. Let's go back. Right, this should be random choices, which allow me to pass the K parameter, as you see the argument. All right, let's go ahead and do it again. Let's say 12, hit enter, and you can see we have our awesome password here. So this, each time we run this, we should get indeed a totally different password. And I'm going to say 13 this time. And you can see we have awesome passwords. Okay, very simple, but straight to the point. So imagine that we have a lot of pictures and you want to make sure that all those pictures have a watermark. It could be a text with your name, or it could be an image, whatever it is, right? So this next automation tool we're going to be creating with Python is going to do exactly that, which means it will allow us to watermark automatically all of the images on a certain folder. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. By the way, you will have access to all of the code in the description below. So there you go. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we'll do, as you see here, I do have my project. It's open and I have a few things. First thing you have here is a TTF file, which is a font file we're going to be using for this project. And I also have my env. This is the local environment for Python that I'm using for this project. So if you are not familiar with all of that, no worries, you can go to the code repository in the GitHub, and then I do have a README file that explains a little bit about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file here called main.py. Back here, actually, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this input directory. So this is where we're going to put all of the images we want this script to Watermark. And I've added a few images here. So these are all images, as you can see here, that I got from online. I'm going to first import OS. Okay, and I'm going to also import a few other things such as pill. So pill is a very extensive library, Python library, that allows you to manipulate images. So that's exactly what we need here. So I'm going to say pill. Actually, I'm going to say from pill, import image and image draw, as well as image font. So we're going to use a different font, which is the font that we added here for our application. I'm going to define here a function, and this function is going to have a few inputs. Directories essentially is where all of the images with watermark, now that's where it's going to go. They're going to go, and let's pass the watermark text. I'm going to pass the position where you want this watermark to be, and also I'm going to say font size and just set it to 30 as a default number. Okay, so first we are going to create output directory if it does not exist. So I'm going to say if not, I'm going to use the OS, use the path exists, put the output directory. So saying if that doesn't exist, what we want to do, we want to go ahead and make one. So I'm going to say OS, use the make dirs, okay, and then pass the output directory like that. And the next thing we need to do here is to go through the directory itself, right, where we have all the images, and loop through and get all those images and start the processing. So I'm going to put in a for loop here outside of our if not file name in os.list directory inside of that. So input directory. So we're going to go inside of that directory, which is our input directory. In this case, it's going to be what we have here. And we're going to loop through and get all of the images. I'm going to check first if file name, use the lowercase, and say ends with. I'm going to check to make sure that all of the files end with certain extensions. So it could be JPEG, MBB, or BMP. And then we're going to go ahead and get the image path. So I'm going to say image path. We'll create the image path. And I'm going to say OS, that path. And I'm going to join. I'm going to put the input directory and the file name as such. Okay, so now we have our image path, each image path for the images that we have inside of the directory. So if you have 100 images, of course, it will go ahead through all of them. That's the beauty, right? Very good. Now we're going to go ahead and get the original image from, of course, this image path. Okay, so to do so, it's very simple because we have imported our image from Pale, this library here. So it's really simple to actually get that image. So I'm going to say original, and I'm going to say image, right? Use image dot open, and I'm going to pass the image path. So for each image, I'm going to create an actual original image so we can do things with it. And from that, we're actually going to extract the size of the image. In this case, the width and the height of the image. To do that, I'm going to say width, height, and I'm going to use original again, which is the image, and I'm going to get the size like that. So I'm destructing, in this case, I'm going to have height and image and width of this original image that we just created, really. So next, let's go ahead and create image draw object, because we want to be able to draw on that image for each image, right, that we created, okay, that actually we pulled in from our directory. We want to make sure that we are able to draw something. In this case, it's going to be our watermark. So to create that object, we are going to call this draw, and I'm going to use the image draw library and invoke the draw, and then pass the original, which is the image. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and create the font that we're going to be using to draw, to write essentially. So I'm going to put that in a font, and I'm going to use the image font, which we have access to, and I'm going to use the true type, and in this case pass the name of our font. It has to be exactly the same, .ttf, very good. And then I'm going to add the size for each font, and I'm going to pass, in this case, our font size, which we are passing at the top here, right, through our function as an argument. Okay, so now we have a font, and next what we're going to do is to get the text dimensions, because actually what we want to do is when we look at an image, if you look at this image for instance, we want to make sure that we get the size, the dimensions of this whole image, so that we can position our watermark here to the bottom right corner. Okay, so we need to do a little bit of math, but it's okay. You have access to all of this anyway. It's not very complicated. First, we're going to get text dimensions and text width first. And I'm going to go font, right? Each font will have its own dimensions, so we can do that. And then I'm going to get mask as such. And then I'm going to pass the actual text, which is what we're going to be passing around here. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and get box, get b box, and then do the syntax here. So essentially I'm getting the width of the text. That's all we're doing here using the font get mask function. I'm going to do the same thing, of course, for the height. So text, and of course in this case it's going to be 3. All right, very good. So we have the text height as well as the text width, which we'll need so that we can calculate where to put on the screen, rather on the image. Okay, next I'm going to add a margin, which is going to be 100. We're going to use this variable because we're going to put margin around the text so that it looks nice. You'll see that. So next we're going to make sure that we want the coordinates that will allow us to put the image where we want them to be, or rather the text on the image. Like I said earlier, so we want to make sure that it's right about here. That's why we're getting all those dimensions. I'm going to just paste the code here because to make things faster. So essentially I'm putting in A and B. So essentially to get the chords to place the watermark, in this case the bottom corner, the bottom right corner, what we do is we take the width of the image. If you remember here, we have the width and the height from the image, right? And then we subtract the text width, which we got here, minus this margin. This is just to give some sort of a margin padding around the text. Okay, and that's it. And then what we need to do here, I'm going to also say the X, Y positioning, and I'm going to pass that the position as such. Okay, so put that position inside there. So remember this position here, it is what we are going to be passing along. All right, so now all we have to do is to apply the watermark. All right, so I'm going to use draw, because remember we have this draw object here, image draw, which is the actual object that allows us to draw onto. Okay, text, we can draw different things, but we're going to draw text. In this case, I'm going to pass, first of all, the coordinates. I'm going to say A and B. Remember, I could have named anything, but I'm going to just use A and B for now. And you notice I could actually get rid of this because we're not really using, but you can also use these X, Y, because these are going to be the position that we enter, or the user enters, as you will see in a bit. So I'm passing here the coordinates X and Y, which in this case A and B, right, where we want to put the watermark. Okay, so once we do that, then we are going to pass the watermark, which is the text that we want to write, right? And then we pass fill. In this case, it's the color of the text. I'm just going to say white. And then I'm going to pass the font, which is the font that we just create. Okay, right here. So next we are going to say output path, and I'm going to create the through OS and create a path, and I'm going to put the output directory, and then we are going to pass here just the name of the image. In this case, I'm going to append something like that says watermarked, and then underscore. And then of course I'm going to just pass the file name as such. Okay, so to when we output the actual image. So we did, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that image by saying original. That's save, and then I'm going to save that where in the output path like this. Okay, and I'm going to just put a print here that says something like watermarked image saved as, and I can put the output path. Remember, all of that is inside of our if statement here, because that's very important, inside of our for loop. Indentation is very important, but I'm going to get out of that and paste some code as you see here. So essentially what I'm doing here for the input directory, I'm going to put input directory, which is going to be this here. In your case, you can actually put the entire path like you see here, wherever you have your images. So I just put something different, and the output directory is going to be also close here in this project, but it could be anywhere else as well. And I call this output directory. Okay. And then the watermark, this is the fun part. This is where you put what you want to be written as watermark on the image. And then the position is 50-50, but as I said before, that will only work if we actually use XY inside here. So I created this AB just to make it a little bit more so I can control where this watermark is going to be. And so now all we have to do is to call the add text and start passing all of the arguments. So I'm going to put the input directory, output directory is going to be output directory, watermark text, I'm going to call this watermark, position, I can put position, but we know that's not going to really work because we've changed a few things, but that's okay. And then the font size, I'm going to just say a little bit larger, 199, something like this. Okay, for this to work, I need to also install, say pip install, because I need to install these dependencies, libraries. It's going to be pillow as such. Clear. Now I can say Python 3 and main.py. Okay, so you see it's doing its work. All the images should be saved in the output directory. If we open now, let's see, ta-da, you can see we have our images. You can see each one of these images have these Vinci bits, right? And you can see it also has the watermarked underscore, which we added, and it is indeed working. Very, very cool. So this is the fun thing about Python, is that you can do things to automate your life, right? Imagine you have 1,000 pictures and you've taken those pictures and you want a way to watermark them. Instead of doing it yourself, putting the things, in Photoshop, you can use this to the point script and then run it, and then all of the images on that folder will be, in this case, will have a watermark. All right, now let's go to our next and final automation. Our next project is going to be one of my favorites because we're going to be able to further see how awesome Python is, especially when it comes to automating our lives, really. So what this project will do, well, we're going to be able to tap into the NASA's API, which allows us to get an image, and then we're going to take that image and add into a PDF file along with some information about that image. And this is really cool, very powerful. I'm very excited. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so the first thing we need to do actually before we do anything is we need to go to the api.nasa.gov. This is very important. You're probably going to end up here. And what we need to do is to go to generate API key, because we need this API key in order for us to call the API and get the information that we need. So click on generate API key. You add your first name, last name, and email. And of course, optional, you can add why you want to use or how you're going to use this, but it's optional. And the moment you say sign up, if I remember correctly, you should get your API key. So save that API key because we're going to need it. Okay, once you have your API key, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create the main.py. There's nothing there. And then I'm going to import a few libraries, requests. This is going to allow us to actually make those HTTP calls. We have the pill, get the image from pill, and bytes.io, and of course the fpdf, which allows us to generate PDFs and manipulate PDF files. Next, we need to go ahead and do a pip install to get all the libraries. In this case, I'm going to pip install and fpdf as such. Make sure I already have them, but make sure you run that. And once you do that, you should be ready to rock and roll. So we're going to go ahead and create a few functions that we're going to be using to build this entire script. Okay, so the first function we're going to create is going to be fetch NASA image and description. We're going to pass the API key. In this case, for now, I'm going to just go ahead and return none. And we're also going to go ahead and create this other one called save image from URL. This does exactly that. So we're going to be able to pass a URL of that image and the file name we want this image to have, and return the actual image, or save that image, okay, and return that. So I'm going to say none for now because we are going to work on that in a little bit. And then we have the create PDF with image and text. This is where we're going to pass the image path, the text, and the PDF file. And for now, this is going to also return none. And I'm going to define the main function such, and then pass main so it runs. For now, let's just say hello, so we don't have that issue. So what we'll do now, let's start working on the first one. So the fetch NASA image and description, we'll have to pass the API key, create an URL, and pass this long HTTP here. So essentially, we are getting to the endpoint of where we can get the image of the day. And we pass the API key that we'll be passing along when this is called. Create here a response, right? I'm going to use request and then say get and pass, in this case, the URL. So this way we are getting the response when we hit this endpoint, right? Which is the API. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and say response, and I'm going to invoke the raise for status. So we have that status comes in, and we're going to put that in a data variable. I'm going to say response that get, or actually response.json, just to make it a JSON object so we can work with it easily. And now I'm going to go ahead and get the image URL from our JSON, which in this case I'm going to say data.get. It's going to be URL, and I know that it's URL because I've looked at it. So you can go to the documentation of this API and all of that is going to be there. So nothing really new here. You can do that on your own. And then I'm going to get the description of the image. It's another field, description as such, and I believe it's called explanation instead of description. And then I'm going to return all of these. I'm going to return the image URL as well as a description as such. And I'm going to get rid of that because we no longer need that. Now we're going to go to a save image from URL. As you see here, we're going to get the URL. How do we get that URL? Well, we'll get the URL from the fetch data image and description, which we'll see in a little bit. Here, I'm going to also say response is equal to requests and get this pass the URL because we need to get the image. Okay. And I'm going to create the actual image arc, right? And I'm going to use the image object from pill and say get open. And then we pass here the bytes IO, and then we say response and we get the content. So essentially we're using bytes IO because the image is going to come in as bytes. So we need to transform that in an actual object image that we can use. Okay, and then we're going to save that image. So image that's saved, and then we save, of course, the file name that we want to attach to this image. And then we return our file name. Okay, it's going to be this one here, which is going to be what's the image going to be saved as. Okay, very good. Now we're going to go ahead and create the actual PDF file. And for that to work, of course, we have to pass all of these parameters or arguments. In this case here, we do have a little bit of work. So just to save time, I'm going to speed up everything because you also have access to this code. So it's all good. All right, so what we'll do first is we're going to create a PDF object that we're going to be using to manipulate and create the actual PDF. For that, we're going to say PDF and instantiate our PDF or FPDF. That's what's called. Okay, instantiate that class. And then we can use that handle there to say add page function. So to create the actual page blank canvas, okay, a PDF file. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and load the actual image. So how do we load the image? I'm going to say with image in this case, or actually image that open. Okay, and I'm going to pass the image path. It's going to be as an image. And then I'm going to say image width. So I'm getting the image width and in this case the height, because we're going to need that. And I'm going to say image or img that size. So again, we're distracting really getting the image width and the image height from our image that we just created or we're getting here. Okay, next is going to involve a little bit of code, which I'm going to explain. I'm just going to go ahead and show you here real quick. So now we're going to go ahead and calculate the width and height of the PDF file. because we want to make sure that the image is going to be at the top and the text description is going to be at the bottom of that image always. So that's what we're doing here. We are creating the millimeter per inch DPI, right? We can change accordingly. And here we're using the PDF image width, in this case, to get the PDF image width. And we do some calculations. So we use the image width divided by DPI. So essentially it's just a resolution and multiply by the inch. So this is just certain calculations. And then we're adjusting the image dimensions to fit the page to make sure that everything fits nicely. Okay. And once that is done, this is when we are actually going to add image to our PDF file, because at this point the PDF file has been created, all the dimensions are set up, and we can go on with our lives. So I'm going to say PDF, and let's go say image, right? And we're going to add, in this case, the image through image path, and then the X coordinate, I'm going to just add 10 units, and the Y about 30 units. You can always change that, but I found this to be really good. They work. And then the width, in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and add the new width that was added right before here, okay, which is what we created here. And next we're going to go ahead and start the text below the image. So I'm going to go ahead and say PDF and set Y 30 plus new height and add 10. So to add a little bit of buffer between the image you will see at the top, right, and the text at the bottom. And okay, now we're gonna go ahead and add the actual text. So it's a PDF. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and add the actual text using the PDF file, in this case, which we are constructing it, and set the font first. We can change to whatever we want, but first it's gonna be Arial. The size is 12, and then we add the multi-cells, essentially align everything so we pass the actual text. All right. And next we're going to go ahead and save PDF. To save, we say PDF, say output or output like this, and we pass the PDF file name, and we can put a little print here, image and PDF files created like this. And if we want, we can just pass the PDF file name. So inside of our main here, we're going to add a few things. So the first thing I'm going to add is the NASA API key. So go ahead and add that here, yours. Okay. And then what we'll do is we're going to get the image URL, description, and date, right? We don't need date actually, because I got rid of that, but you get the idea, because we're calling the fetch NASA image and pass the NASA API key. If you remember, this is what we created at the top here. Okay, so now we're just calling those functions. And once we have that image URL, then we can create the image path. Okay, the image path, because it needs the image URL. As you can see, we pass it there, and we name it NASA image JPEG. Very good. And then last but not least, we're going to call the create PDF with image and text. And so in this case, I'm going to have to pass the image path as well as the description and the name of the file that we want. So okay, just say something. You can name it whatever you want. Don't forget it .pdf like this. All right, just like that, we should be able to see something hopefully that works. So let's go ahead and run this real quick. Okay, so now I'm going to say Python 3 and main, hit run. Voila, image and PDF files created. There we go. And if I go here, you can see there's an image. If I click that, you can see, very cool. That is the image of the day, of course. And if I click here, you can see I do have a PDF file that was created with, in this case, the image and the text description of this image. So every time you run, of course, if you were to run again, we would get the same image because it's still the same day. But every day, if you were to run this, it would go ahead and pull the image as well as creating a PDF file with image and description, as you see here. All right, so we're able to put together those 3 scripts, right, that allow us to use automation with Python. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you what to do here is to create another script, but this is what we call a bash script, okay, that will allow us to run quickly and easily our scripts. I know a lot of scripts that I'm talking about here. So if you look, and I'm going to say right click, and I'm going to call this run, and make sure that you have sh for shell script. That's very important. In this case, we're going to write some commands that will do the work in the back end, right? So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to add what they call the shebang. So this is what tells our operating system that this is a shell script. Now you notice the difference here is that I have this bin zsh because I'm on Mac, and if you're on Windows, you would probably want something like this. So you would probably put something like this, just bash. Okay, so for me, I am on Mac, so I'm going to leave it as is. And the next thing we'll do, we are going to use some commands here. Change directory, cd, and we're going to change to the directory where this project is. Now, the quickest way to see where this project is, I would say pwd. This is working directory, so it's going to print the working directory. If I hit enter, it's going to give me this entire working directory where our project is. So that's where we're going to put it here to say that we want to cd into this project, and then we want to run the main file, which is our project, right? Our entire project. So we're just going to pass here Python 3 in my case, say main.py. Now, in most cases, if we need to retrieve something from the user, in this case, we don't need to retrieve anything because this doesn't require us to get anything from the user input. If we were to do this with our password script, then you would put something like this, $1 to say, hey, get us the input of whatever the users have entered. Okay, so in this case here, I won't add anything, so I'll leave it as is. And that's it. Once we have that, it's saved. We have this run script. I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these other things here. And what we can do now easily, I can run one command which will prompt this, or run this run script that's sh, and then run our application. zsh for me, okay? And then I'm going to call the name of the script, the bash, the shell script, right? So I'm going to say run script.sh, hit enter, and look what's going to happen. It says image and PDF files created, which indeed you can see they were added here right away. And of course we get to see the same thing because we're getting from the API, which just gives us the same image a day. If this was a different day, obviously in your case you will see a different image as well as a different description as you see here. So there we go. So what I want you to do is to do the same thing with other projects that we did here. Keep in mind, in cases where you need to retrieve information, in this case from the console, the input, you would have to put $sign and 1 to say that the script is expecting to receive something from the user so it can work. Okay, very good. And just like that, we have 3 awesome projects that are fun, and most importantly, they are useful, so you can actually use this, right? Thank you so much for your time, and if you're new to this channel, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.